My name is Jimmy Chavez, and I work for the National Park Service. This is a diamondback, and sometimes during this year, people like to run them over and just take the rattlesnakes and just pull them off on purpose. But this one wasn't killed on purpose. It was an accident, so the rattlers are still on it. People like to collect the rattlers and stuff. Oh, I've been here for 12 years, so I've seen them all. You know, the only animal that I haven't seen is two animals so far: is the badger and the mountain lion, because we do have mountain lions out here. And we have a few years ago we got motion sensor cameras out here, and we've captured a mountain lion with its cubs, two cubs. So that was pretty interesting. So we know they're still out here. A lot of animals in this desert, whether you don't think there is, there is.
Take some time with us today, and I expect you'll get all riled up by the end. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Thank you. Please hold all the applause till the end, at which time you won't have any, so we can negate that problem.
I met Dr. Guy McPherson through his online blog, Nature Bats Last. He's also the author of Walking Away from Empire, his personal story about walking away from a tenured academic position at the University of Arizona to a permaculture settlement in New Mexico as a protest against the industrial empire. In the fall of 2011, I spent 10 days documenting life with Guy McPherson, and then I filmed him giving a presentation to a class of undergraduates at the University of Arizona. Later, in June of 2012, I filmed him giving a public presentation at the Buena Vista Audubon in San Diego.
As John Ralston Saul pointed out in his 1992 book, Voltaire's Bastards, never has failure been so ardently defended as success.
At the University of Arizona, Guy McPherson was nicknamed Dr. Doom by the students, but the administration took a decidedly different view on Guy's activities, even accusing him of having a personality disorder.
I have an undergraduate degree in forestry from the University of Idaho. I grew up in Idaho, so that was all about resource extraction. And then I pursued a master's and a PhD in range science, which are all about resource extraction. So this is about growing food and fiber for an emerging nation, for a growing nation. And that's a fine model up until, say, World War II, after which it's a model that is behind the times. But that's the path I pursued. I acquired a PhD in 1987, pursued a postdoc in ecology at the Institute of Ecology at the University of Georgia. My first academic position was a fixed-term position at Texas A&M University. And then my first tenure-track position was at the University of Arizona. I landed there at the age of 29 on May 1st, 1989.
What if you're walking to school every day, and every day you see an old woman and she's killing babies? She's killing human babies. And you see it every day. And she's killing them at a rate of every, 10 minutes or so. So what do? What's your moral obligation? And most people look at me like I'm insane, like I haven't seen that look before. And then I say, okay, what if it's not an old woman? You know, you could actually stop an old woman, right? You could go beat her up. It's just an old woman. What if it's police state America? What if it's not 200 babies a day? What if it's 200 species a day? This entire area, all the way as far as you can see into the distance in the camera, used to be cactus garden. And since the 1960s, we've converted it all to this monoculture lawn. So we use millions of years old fossil fuels to pull out 10,000-year-old groundwater to water this non-native monocultural lawn. Behind me is the Joseph W. Cooch Memorial Cactus Garden. This is what this entire mall used to look like for a mile east of here. You can see that the garden is far more interesting than the monoculture lawn we have growing for the vast majority of the mall currently. This cactus garden is where I accidentally launched my career as a social critic
I had been trying to correspond with the president of the university about his desire to remove the last piece of native desert from the campus and make more room for red brick pavers and fountains, because college campuses don't have enough of those, obviously. They're all over the place. So I pointed out the value of saving the last piece of native desert in the middle of the Sonoran Desert. And he didn't answer any of my calls or return my messages. So in an act of frustration, I sent one of the letters I had sent to him to the local daily newspaper. And I thought they might pursue it as a news story. Instead, they edited it slightly and ran it as an open letter to the president. It just surprised me. I thought I was submitting a piece of evidence for a news story, and then it appears on the front page of the opinion page. And that's okay, because then the president called me right away. He'd been ignoring me up till that point, and now that it's in the news, suddenly I'm worth responding to. Academics, particularly tenured academics, have considerable academic freedom, and crossing that line of academic freedom is something that administrators do with some trepidation. Now, they did it in my case, and they tried to call me out and tried to shut me down. William Catton wrote a book that was published in 1980 called Overshoot, in which he describes what happens when a species overshoots its resource base. Guess what? They either decline or they collapse catastrophically. We're no different than those yeast I mentioned earlier. We're just another organism in the petri dish.
In about 2005, I met Guy McPherson because I was creating some fact sheets for homeowners on landscape conservation, and I decided that I was going to use the professors here in the Department of School of Natural Resources to help me inform the public, and I was told, you need to go see Guy McPherson. So I made an appointment. I walked into his office and introduced myself, talked about the project, and asked him a question. And the first words out of his mouth were, wait, back up, sit down, tell me about yourself.
So I insisted that students come to class prepared to think. My classes are run as a discussion almost completely. I ask questions. The students answer those questions or they don't, but we are a core of discovery. We're in this together. We're all trying to learn something. So that's a different experience than almost every college course, and certainly all the ones I've been in, which are instructor teaches. It's the sage on the stage model.
As time went on, I started to listen to more about what Guy was teaching in his classes. I actually took a class that he was teaching called Vegetation Management, and once we got into the classroom, it really centered on not really vegetation management, but landscape use and the consequences of using the landscape as we do in this country and the far-reaching impacts it has. And I was really taken not only by the message, but by the way Guy was selling it. And he is an extremely gifted speaker and an inspirational mentor. And he got more than one of us to start meeting with him on a regular basis about things not academic.
I taught a course called Conservation Biology about 10 years before I left. And then I was teaching a course called Vegetation Management for many years. This is a course I developed. I invented it and taught it for many years. Both of those courses were broad enough, and I broadened them over time. They were broad enough to include various aspects of the way we live our lives. So it's difficult for me to talk about managing vegetation without also talking about personal consumption and what it takes to maintain an imperial set of living arrangements, because they're so intricately interconnected. So one of the first acts of my final department head was to ban me from teaching in my home department, including that course which I developed and taught for many years. I absolutely was persecuted while I was there. You don't take somebody's class away that they invented and taught for 10 years without that being viewed as an act of persecution. There's very little power the department head actually has. One of the relatively few things he or she can do is assign the courses that are going to be taught to the individual faculty members. So, in that case, she decided I wasn't going to teach any classes in the department.
In any event, so I came here into the school then known as the School of Renewable Natural Resources. This is the brass ring. This is as good as it gets, right? You get a decent paid job, you get to travel as much as you want, you get to work on whatever you want. In the historical sense, you get to live a life of leisure. A life of leisure in the historical sense means you get to choose the work you do. And that's what tenured professors and tenure track professors get to do. They get to do what they want. So I got to pursue the research I wanted and basically teach the classes I wanted and do the outreach I wanted. And it was all going so swimmingly since I hadn't thought yet. But then I read a book. I guess I wouldn't recommend that either. I read Arundhati Roy's Power Politics. Came out in 2001. And she says in there, and I quote, "The trouble is that once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once you've seen it, keeping quiet, saying nothing, becomes as political an act as speaking out. There's no innocence. Either way, you're accountable."
We're driving to extinction somewhere on the order of 200 species a day. What gives us the right? We are acting as gods, and really, really poor gods at that. That's what it takes to support the industrial economy, is pummeling other species and other cultures and making them disappear so that we can have warm pizza and cold beer. I'm a professor emeritus, and for most people that means they're retired. Emeritus just means retired. And in my case, emeritus means I left in despair and disgust. I was despairing and I was disgusted at the fact that the university had become a reflection of contemporary culture. All that mattered was growth, and in particular economic growth. And the university was pursuing that at all costs. There was no indication that there might be a better way to live than the industrial American capitalist pursuit of empire. A decade ago, I was editing a book on climate change, and I came to the conclusion that we had committed ourselves to extinction at our own hand, probably by mid-century. This is long before the 2007 IPCC's fourth assessment, which forecast a 1 degree C temperature increase by the end of this century. It was long before anybody had come up with the notion that we might cause extinction by climate change. But I put those pieces of information together and came to that conclusion. And I mourned for 6 months, much to the bemused curiosity of the 3 people who noticed. We are so afflicted by normalcy bias that we think it can't happen here, because in all the movies, somebody saves the day at the end and it's all good and it's all fine, it all works out great.
The dean of the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences tried to muzzle me. He actually called the communications coordinator for the college and asked how we could either get rid of me or muzzle me. And she pointed out that neither of those was likely to happen. He wrote a letter to the editor libeling me. In his letter to the editor, he said my views reflected no views of members of the School of Natural Resources or the College of Agriculture. By definition, my views represented some views from the School of Natural Resources and the College of Agriculture because I was a member of those institutions. In addition, he didn't poll anybody else to see if my views reflected other people's views. He just assumed that because my message was dire, it was too far out of the box to be believed by anybody in the School of Natural Resources and the College of Agriculture. So I understand libel law. In that letter, he said things that were not true, that were detrimental to my career. All I asked in response to that libelous letter was that he submit an op-ed feature, a guest commentary, that I wrote for him. So ultimately, he did submit the third or fourth draft of that letter that I wrote. And so shortly thereafter, I left. We shouldn't be just walking away from empire. We should be bringing it down.
For food and shelter?
For me, it was more of like it was a win-win situation for everybody. I mean, I think woofing is cool because we help people and they help us, but we don't really have to worry about the whole monetary thing, you know? I think that's a big part of, I struggle with the monetary thing a lot.
My name's Gina Strupp, and I'm the owner here at Castellanos Country Store. I got lucky, and through my volunteering and working with the community for the last 14 years before that, I was able to just be connected to the right people through my gardening. Gardening is what I do, what I did before this. I taught children how to garden. My main purpose was really to teach kids about self-worth and sustenance and give them a little piece of, I can kind of take care of myself. The products bring people here, which is interesting because I don't even really care that much about it, but my goal was to create a community hub. So basically what I'm doing with the community part, one of the ways I've found to draw in more community people is to hire people who are entrenched in the community, and then it just creates a family experience. So.
I first found out about WOOF, which is Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. And I'd never heard of that before. Nobody I knew had ever done this. And I did the WOOF thing last year for the first time at Salamander Springs in Georgia. A wonderful woman, Debbie Waugh, owns that place. It's a similar sort of feel to how Sherry and Keely work here.
Started kind of with an idea that there has to be something different than the rat trap of the big city, and to try and get back to nature. And I was told about the Hermitage, and it sounded a permaculture hermitage. It's a closed system, and it's something I've never seen before, but it's a model I think I would like to follow.
I had been living in the middle of Manhattan and working for 6 years.